Hello and welcome to the Ourdadsstamps YouTube channel, where we talk about all things related to stamps and stamp collecting. My name's Pete West and I'd like to thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoy it, and if you do, please click on the like button and don't forget to subscribe to get regular updates of new content. For today's video, I thought I'd talk about the stamps of Bermuda. During my time I've had lots of different stamps from Bermuda and I've always quite liked the look of them, so I thought I'd do this episode. Bermuda was actually one of the first places in the world to introduce the uniform postal rate. It's only a couple of years after it happened in the United Kingdom with the penny black. But the earliest stamps appear in 1848. These were designed and printed by the Postmaster General at the time, a guy called William Bennett Perot. And the story goes that he didn't always spend his time in the post office. He enjoyed other activities, shall we say. And when he wasn't there, it obviously meant people couldn't post their letters. He devised a system where he put a letterbox on the outside of the building and people could put their letters in there, plus the penny to cover the cost of the postage. And then he would send them on when he was actually working. The problem with that is, of course, that not everybody left the penny, and quite often he realised there were more letters than there were pennies. So in order to overcome this, he came up with a rudimentary stamp, and this was in the form of a circle with the words Hamilton, Bermuda on the outside and a date on the inside. He then wrote the value, which generally was 1 penny, and signed the stamp in the middle in order to avoid any fraudulent copies going through. These stamps were in use for several years. They were only used for internal post within the Bermuda Islands. However, as I said, they were in use for several years, but curiously only 11 of them survived. And because there are so few of them around, they obviously command a huge premium. You would need a minimum of £100,000 to get your hands on one of these, and it's very unlikely that you would ever find one for sale. So they certainly are one of the rarer stamps of the world, and quite unusual looking as well. They remind me a bit of the 1 cent magenta from British Guiana, in that the local postmaster has devised it himself, got it printed himself, and then signed them himself to avoid fraud. And they are very similar to that. There are only 11 known copies in existence, and the Royal Collection, the Queen, has 3 of these, so it's highly unlikely that you will ever come across them. But if you're lucky to get to see one, that would be interesting. The first stamps to be used in Bermuda, the first stamps as we know them to be used in Bermuda, were printed by De La Rue and were issued in 1865. And these covered 3 values: a penny, a sixpence, and a 1 shilling. And these were for the various weights and sizes and distances for the post to be delivered. Over the years, other values came into being, such as the twopence and the threepence, making quite a nice set that could be collected, and in used condition, not exorbitantly expensive either. In 1874 and 1875, some of these stamps were overprinted with different values. Firstly by threepence, and then the following year with a penny. Now the threepenny stamps were overprinted initially on the 1 penny rose and then on the 1 shilling green. Presumably there was a shortage of threepenny stamps at the time, and there was an abundance of 1 shilling stamps. So that would explain why the shilling ones were overprinted. Similarly, the following year, a 1 penny was overcharged on several stamps, on the twopence, the threepence and the shilling. So my guess is that they were running desperately short of 1 penny stamps at that time and needed to overprint the other stamps just so that they had a supply. One curious feature about Bermuda stamps is they never printed a stamp with Edward VII's figure on them. When Queen Victoria died and the supply of her stamps ran out, they printed stamps initially showing the dry dock at Bermuda, and then this was followed up with another set in 1906 showing a caravel, which is a type of ship. There was never a stamp issued with Edward VII's image on it. I'm not sure why that was the case. I've come across it before in Jamaica, and eventually in 1912 they then printed only one, but they printed one with Edward VII's. It seems strange to us that the monarch would not feature on the stamps. But if you think about it, at the time, the only monarch that there had been during the time of stamps was Queen Victoria. So it wasn't really set in stone that they should feature the monarch. And as I said, certainly for Bermuda, it never featured Edward VII. This changed when George V came to the throne, and Bermuda, like a lot of Commonwealth countries, produced the George V key types for the high values. This was a standard design that was used in many Commonwealth countries, and the printers only needed to change the value and the name of the country to be able to send it to different places throughout the world. So it was an efficient system and an efficient way of printing stamps, because the basic design could be printed over and over again. And then, as I said, just change the name of the country and in some cases the value. In Bermuda, it's available as a 2 shilling, 2 and 6, 5 shilling, 10 shilling and £1. These are quite valuable. Certainly in used form, they're more valuable than they are in mint form. The lower values, the 2 shilling, 2 and 6, are not too expensive, but obviously the higher you go up, the more they cost. To the £1 being catalogued at over £300. So they are nice looking stamps. And because they're used in lots of Commonwealth countries, it can be a nice thematic to collect, but it's a very expensive thematic to collect. There was a commemorative tercentenary set printed in 1920, which is quite nice and quite unique to Bermuda. That goes up to a shilling. And then the first real pictorials were printed in 1936. And once again, these are generally low value stamps from a halfpenny up to 1 and 6, and most of them are bicoloured, so featuring different views and different images in and around Bermuda. The same basic design was used for King George VI stamps as well when he came to the throne. And King George VI also used the key plate high value stamps. And again, they're available in 2 shillings, 2 and 6, 5 shilling, 10 shilling, 12 and 6, and £1. These are nowhere near as expensive as the King George V ones, but still command a bit of a premium, so you need to look around to get good prices on them. But they can be had for as little as a couple of quid, a couple of pounds. So certainly the lower ones, the 2 shillings, 2 and 6, you can pick up quite easily. In 1953, when Queen Elizabeth came to the throne, Bermuda completely redesigned the stamps and produced what I think is a really nice set of stamps. Most of the stamps are in horizontal format, with only a couple of values vertical. That's the penny halfpenny and the 2 and 6. They run from a halfpenny up to £1. And once again, in used form, they are quite readily available and not too expensive. The catalogue value is £35–40 for a used set, and only £100 for a mint set. One thing to watch out for in this set is that the threepence and the 1 and threepence was produced in 2 different dies. There's a feature on the map called Sandy's Parish, and one die has an apostrophe between the Y and the S, and the other die doesn't. So there's 2 different varieties you can collect. Neither of them are particularly rare, so they're quite easy to get hold of in both formats. And it just makes the set more complete if you've got those 2 extra ones. In 1962, once again, Bermuda completely redesigned the look of their stamps and produced a set of historic buildings or important buildings of Bermuda. I think when you've got the whole set together, it looks really nice. each stamp is in 2 or 3 colours. They follow a similar design with a background colour and then the building or the house featuring in a different colour. These stamps range from a penny up to £1, and once again they are not expensive to get hold of. And as I said, I think it's one of the sets I really like, and it's one of the sets that really attracted me to Bermuda stamps. So definitely worth having a look at. In 1970, when Bermuda, like a lot of other countries, went decimal, this set was overprinted with the new decimal currency. And this produced quite an interesting collectible, which I discovered quite by accident. I bought a huge set of Bermuda stamps, which included many of this particular set. And on close inspection, I discovered that the printing of the overprint was actually in different places on many of the stamps. So this led to several different varieties of the same stamp. Now, these are not listed anywhere, and it doesn't particularly make them any more valuable if they're in different places. But if you're a specialist collector and if you're interested in different things, unusual things, then it's certainly something to look out for. As I said, I don't think it's on every single stamp. I didn't find it on every single stamp. But many of the stamps, the overprint was just in a slightly different place, but fairly obviously in a different place. So if unusual things is something you like, then it's worth having a look at. The overprint set only lasted a few months before it was replaced by, again, a new design featuring flowers of Bermuda. And I think whenever there's a pictorial set issued and you can get hold of the whole set reasonably cheaply, it's a nice look. I like the fact that the stamps have like a uniform design with just a different image on them. And for me, collecting the whole set just makes it feel complete, just makes it look better. And if you can display it nicely on a page, then it's something to look out for. There are several of these in the Bermuda stamp issues, and none of them are hugely expensive. So it's certainly something worth looking out for. And I think it makes Bermuda one of the more attractive countries to collect. Another thing I like about Bermuda, which I didn't realise until I did a bit of research for this particular video, is that they have a policy where they only issue 4 new sets a year. Now this is, in my view, is wonderful for the stamp collector. There are so many countries, Britain included, that produce far too many stamps, and it's impossible for the collector to keep up with. But as I said, Bermuda have made it a policy that they will only produce 4 sets each year, and that's got to be something to be applauded, and got to make them a country that maybe is worth looking at a little bit more closely. Being an island nation, the sea features a lot in many of their stamps, and there are several sets that show in galleons and old ships that have visited the island at some point. And in particular, there was a set produced in 1986, which actually shows ships wrecked on Bermuda, which may be a bit of a macabre thing to collect. But again, because they are all uniform with the same basic design, but just different ships on them, somehow they seem quite appealing to me and is a nice looking set. Once again, these go from 3 cents up to $8, but the catalogue value is around about £50, so not hugely expensive and not too prohibitive to get hold of. Bermuda, like a lot of countries, have produced mini sheets for many of their sets, and if you're a mini sheet collector, then there's a whole host of stamps or sheets to collect from Bermuda. There's some nice ones featuring the wildlife and the flora and fauna on the island. There's also some nice ones featuring aircraft. There is, of course, a natural affinity to the British royalty, being a Commonwealth country. And so there's many sets, there's many stamps, there's many mini sheets that you can collect featuring the royal family. And the first Bermuda stamp to feature King Charles is actually quite striking. I quite like the look of it. It's a fairly plain background with a photograph of Charles, taken quite recently, I would imagine. But it looks quite nice. It's quite a high catalogue value. It's a $35 stamp, and you're probably looking at around about £50 to pick one up. But, as I said, I do think it looks quite nice. And then, of course, they did a mini sheet for the coronation. Certainly, the royalty is definitely worth looking at. Okay, well, that was a brief look on the stamps of Bermuda. Once again, I hope you've enjoyed it. If this video has sparked your interest on Bermuda or Bermuda stamps, there's a very good website that I found with lots of information and lots of images of the stamps of Bermuda. And it's www.bermudaonline.org. I'll put a link in the notes for you if you want to have a look, but it's definitely worth looking at and really quite interesting with a lot of information. I'm going to be looking at the stamps of different countries. I've decided over the next few months, I think I'll just pick different countries and look at the stamps of those particular countries. It may not be a completely comprehensive look because most of the stamps we look at are the stamps that I've got or have had in my collection at some point. So it's a bit limited, but I hope you will find this interesting. And if you have suggestions of countries that I might want to look at, then please drop me a line. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you again in a couple of weeks' time. Thank you for listening to the podcast. I hope you found it interesting and enjoyable. Don't forget you can visit my online stores at eBay and Delcamp under the name of Ourdadsstamps, where I have over 2,000 items for sale. Please join us again in 2 weeks' time for another edition of Ourdadsstamps podcast.